Hello, hello.
Yeah, very nice. It's good to see you.
Test your microphones.
Good.
Testing, this is Nico.
Lee, your microphone, just test it out.
Hello.
Perfect.
Am I still here?
Perfect, awesome. So thank you for your talk. So what I think we'll do is try to kind of expand beyond some of the topics that we covered. But first, Lee, you were beginning to say something in your talk, so I just wanted to kind of explore with you to start with, and we can go to the others. Yeah. So you hear a lot of people, including your CEO, Satya Nadella, talk about sort of how mobile apps are going to be replaced by kind of chat bots, whether it's chat or voice-enabled bots. Can you explain to us kind of why that's going to happen?
Yes. Okay. So there are a few things about the problem of the apps. Okay. So, for example, give you one example. This is the example that Microsoft uses all the time. I mean, you go to Disneyland with your family. Right? Maybe you go once a year. Right? And then, in order to navigate, they probably provide some app to you. Right? So you put app there. You occupy a fair amount of space, and you use 1 day, 2 days. And they go home. Normally, you don't delete it, right? So that stay with you for the whole year until you realize that you don't need it. You delete it, right? So the bot actually overcome all this problem, right? You have all this whatever app that can provide you on demand, and that allows you to not to have the need to have the app to download all the time and delete them. And also, bot allows you to customize with the users. And app typically don't do that. But there's so many, about 4 or 5, reasons why. I give you 2 reasons.
So one is the resource, you just have lots of things
Correct.
you never use.
Correct.
And the second is sort of it's more flexible and freeform. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, flexibility and also adaptability, personalization.
Got it.
So because of that only depends on upon the condition that AI is good. If AI is not good, then you're not going to get a good experience, right? So that's a big bet for all of companies, big companies to, that's why when AI is mature, it becomes such important opportunity now due to the big data availability and due to the big computation availability and also due to deep learning, right? So we all believe that it's going to be successful.
Adam, people have sort of likened sort of bots to kind of more like browsers than apps. Any thoughts on
yeah, actually, it turns out that I think we have that statistic I can speak out. So we have Bing search engine. It turned out that the percentage of the people using phones, within phone to use the Bing, it's so tiny. I have the number. I'm not sure what I can't remember what it was. And it just, browser really is good for PC, big screen. For small screen, people don't use that. I mean, you use the app, right? And that's the whole point of using app, right? That's, and I think, so the bot is one stage, one step beyond apps, the one for a few reasons I gave. And then in the mobile world, app is another level above.
And you're making the case that conversational agents are one step beyond that.
Correct.
I think there are a lot of things that, I, of course, am very passionate about what speech I think can do. And I know the next generation of bots are going to be much stronger, I think, than the ones we've seen so far. I think there are a lot of places, though, where visual feedback is really important. When you talk about things like navigation or I think maybe the distinction in what Lee just said that resonates with me is that there are some experiences that are very ephemeral and very flexible, and they change a lot. And those are things where you kind of just want that assistant at Disneyland, right, to just tell you what's going on. And I think bots make a ton of sense for that. For things that are very stable and that we use a lot, and an engineer or an artist or someone wants to convey more to us, I think we're still going to have a lot of the same metaphors we've been using for a while.
Yeah, I do agree. So a few top apps, you still use it, but most of tail apps, I believe in the future it will be replaced all by bots.
Nico?
Well, this is why we didn't, so we had an internal debate when we launched our extensibility of Alexa. we didn't want to call it apps because it's not really the same thing as an app. We call it skills. It's a way to extend the system. And you don't actually download anything with a skill.
Yeah.
It's all built in the cloud. It's all on demand. So the question is not really, I mean, you still need software on your phone or whatever is your device, right? And that might be an app, but a skill is something more lightweight that lives in the cloud. Right?
Adam, I heard you talk about sort of the superiority of, and especially around speed of speech versus text. Are there situations where kind of text makes more sense and will have better
Actually,
adoption?
Since I put TalkType, our voice keyboard, on my phone right after we got the prototype working, kind of having that same question, like, am I really going to use this? Like, am I really going to be like that guy on the street going, "Hello, phone," and like asking it to do things for me? And it's actually really strange that there are things where you want to be discreet, like whatever, it's a really quiet room and you just want to quietly type. But once you trust that this system is going to work, you start using it in places where you just never even thought it was a problem before. So my wife and I use like, texting or Slack or something, and I started sending like these really long messages. I give much more detailed replies to like what was going on and where we were going. And she's like, "Holy cow, how are you typing so fast?" And I suddenly realized like, oh, whereas I would have thought like, oh, this would be very clumsy and frustrating, actually like that speed lets me convey so much more quickly. And it's actually changed a little piece of my life. And I think once people try it and they love it and they play with it, like it will change your habits much faster than you think.
Yeah, so this echoes with what I said in my presentation. Like, for the people who know speech, how to speak, well, especially for you. I mean, you don't have accent. I have accent. I still use speech because I know how to speak. So for those people who know speech, usually we use speech more. We can use much more complex, sentences. But the people who don't know, they get frustrated. They typically use a very small one.
But I think the next
that's the
generation
common-
of speech engines is actually causing this to go away.
Yeah.
I think I have a friend who has an Italian accent, and it drove him bonkers forever. That nothing ever worked for him. We've let him play with some of the new speech engines. Like, this stuff actually works now.
So the millennial generation was sort of went off voice and sort of moved to texting. And you see sort of the next generation, because of the technology, moving to back to speech.
I have some thoughts on that. So texting is really good for asynchronous communication, right? So you could compose your text message with speech recognition, but sending a text message it's a really good way of sending something that you don't have to have a response for right now. But if you look at interaction that's in real time, I want to talk to you while you sit here with me in the bus. I'm not going to text you, right? That's ridiculous. We're sitting next to each other. I'm going to talk to you, and we're still not quite there with these systems because it's cultural. People think it's pretty awkward to maybe talk to a phone like this. But remember when cell phones first came out, it was awkward when people were talking on the phone on the bus,
Especially
right?
when the phone was this big.
Right. And you think they're crazy when you see someone talking to themselves because they have a headset on. So it's cultural, right? But the most efficient way of doing real-time communication is speech. I mean, we've done that for thousands of generations. It's who we are. So that for real time, there's nothing like speech.
What do you think? We're going to kind of shift beyond speech, but I just want to cover a few areas in speech. Adam, what do you think kind of helps improve sort of engagement with speech? Kind of, what about sort of, many of us saw Her, and which featured the sexy voice of Scarlett Johansson, but not Scarlett Johansson's kind of physical self.
I think humans are pretty shockingly good at distinguishing between sort of computers and human beings, right? And so like one of the frustrating things about speech in the past has been that it'll just make these bizarre errors that no human would ever make. And you get really frustrated with the product. It's just like, what a stupid product. Even though it's this amazingly sophisticated piece of engineering. Today, if you look at the really top engines, when they make a mistake, it's actually quite plausible just phonetically. And if you listen to the audio, they're getting very close to human performance for the cases where we have data. And I think once we close that gap, the engagement goes way up because people now know what to expect. Like we already have a model of what will humans do. In some applications like search, you actually have to be superhuman because of the vocabulary and so on. But for things like speaking to a device in everyday language, like our prior is that this should work as well as a human because we know how that works. And when it's just a little bit off of the human being, that's where we get frustrated. And so things like latency, accuracy, the naturalness of the voice, I think those all play into this sort of uncanny valley that we sometimes find ourselves in. But as that gap closes, I think engagement's really going to go up and you're going to see people really using these a lot.
Lee, what about like personality, emotion, interesting content?
Yes, I do believe that this is one of the differentiating characteristics between text-based, bot versus speech-based bot. Although nowadays speech recognition doesn't produce personal information out, right? So it doesn't actually tell you, you're angry, you're happy, whatever. And that information human actually can get that very easily, right? So computers sometimes make mistakes. I think that this is the aspect of subtlety about speech, the cues that convey a whole bunch of things. I call the paralinguistic information is something speech-based system actually has good advantage. So I do encourage, companies and researchers actually try to think about scenarios to fully take advantage of this kind of paralinguistic information. And actually this type of information actually have been used before deep learning. Because people probably exhausted all the ways to do things, right? I have been struggling before deep learning for so many years. It's incremental, and then of course energy get diverted to do other things, right? And that's how I think this is coming back. The reason why people haven't got into this area is because there's so many other low-hanging fruit people can get, right? Like looking at Adam presentation, I think your presentation. If you increase data, you still can lower error rate, right? So, why don't you, get all these low-hanging fruit before you actually go to some more difficult part? But I think down the road, people will get into the area.
Nico, any thoughts on what are the big improvements over the next 2 years in automatic speech recognition?
Yeah, can I just mention something about what we talked about earlier about an engaging and a system that is emotional and so on. This is a really hard problem, and I think we need to solve it to get that next level. What we've done at Amazon is we've instituted this Alexa Prize. I don't know if you've heard about it, but we sponsor 12 university teams to build a conversational system that can have a conversation with a human the same way as a human does. And it's kind of the grand prize is to build a system that actually can fool humans, kind of like a Turing test. And so that's what we're doing there. I think it requires a lot of creativity and new research. So we're not, we just don't have the resources to do it all ourselves. So we've farmed it out to the best universities in the world. What was the other question?
Just kind of major enhancements to automatic speech recognition you see coming in the next couple of years?
Well, from my point of view, since we're very focused on far-field speech recognition in rooms with multiple people and other noise sources, so that's one of the things that I think we're going to make lots of progress in, to understand the sound scene, know what sound comes from what direction, maybe even know that there are two people speaking at the same time and hearing what both are saying.
Simultaneously.
Those are really hard problems that I think we're going to make progress on.
So I personally feel that at least 5 areas. Well, this is one of the areas, that's fairly short term. I think within 1 year you can make a big breakthrough in this area. So another area I myself have a little interest in, because I'm actually getting into, most of my effort now is in natural language understanding and also dialogue policy stuff. Right? I personally really believe that when you get end-to-end system, that actually gets answer, it's a lot more than recognition. Right? So a lot of speech recognition errors, you simply just cannot correct, right? Because acoustics are so similar to each other, right? So you really need to use the back end. Sometimes language model can correct them, but mostly if you actually know what you expect the output to be, like when you have constrained domains, it really is powerful to correct, most errors. I think that, that's called end-to-end design. Not just recognition, but also from end-to-end, from input directly to what the dialogue system will come up. And from that perspective, I think a lot of errors will be automatically corrected.
Yeah, I think really to kind of riff on the Nico's and Lee's points is that I think one of the first barriers to come down is going to be the breadth of things that we can tackle, right? More environments. Accents is incredibly important for China. You have lots of local dialects and accents. And this is a huge problem for supervised learning that powers all of these training methods today. But I think as we get more data and computing power, that push is going to let us serve a lot more people and a lot more applications, and that's going to happen very quickly. I do agree with what Lee is saying in that at some point we're going to start reaching human level where you can listen to those really reverberant clips and even lots of humans listening to it over and over can't get it right. And we just have to start looking at things like conversation. You say, yeah, did you really mean that? And really using the context. I think those technologies are maybe a little further along once we start getting the speech piece to work for everybody, but I agree that those are the big directions.
Can you talk, Adam, about the other components of the stack of a kind of a autonomous agent? We talked a lot about about speech recognition. What about the natural language and other components?
Yeah, I think as you kind of heard several times, like natural language has definitely come a little bit later to the deep learning party in terms of seeing the big impact than say speech and vision have. So I think there's a lot more room to run there. But there are a lot of problems that are just, they look like machine learning problems, right? Like detecting trigger words, doing it fast, making sure you get it right even in a crowded room. Things like intent detection. If I ask you to play a song for me, is that part of a conversation like I'm chatting with someone, or did I actually mean for you to play a song for me? All of these are very well-posed machine learning problems, and I think deep learning is just going to keep making those things better and better and better. And that goes for speech. At some point, I hope, like as Lee is talking about, we'll be able to put all of these under one thing, and we won't even think of them as a software stack anymore. We'll start talking about them as like an AI or a neural network stack. But I think all of these pieces have this flavor that we've got the problem framed, and the one that I think is still open is like natural language understanding. That's the hardest one to frame as like a really crisp machine learning problem. And so as far as which pieces of the stack are going to make a lot of progress, I think natural language understanding is going to be the tough nut.
Especially in a kind of a context that is not
Exactly.
very narrow.
Yeah.
Lee?
Yeah, so I agree with what Adam said, except just to point out that there's another very important component that's called dialogue policy. How do you decide what's the best thing to come out? Right? And that requires, the input to be the understanding component, the slots, the intent slot. And then, the talk I didn't have time to go through here. You really can very nicely formulate that dialogue problem as the action. It's like, the same algorithm as the AlphaGo, the same algorithm as the self-driving car, end to end. So the way you treat the output from the system agent to the human to be the action, as in reinforcement learning. If you think that way, and everything fits just perfect well in terms of reward function, and then these data are very easy to be detected using some very basic natural language technique. You can actually see that what is successful.
Nicole, some concluding thoughts?
Yeah, well, I agree that natural language understanding is probably the most ill-defined problem at this point, and so that's why it's hard. It's such a sprawling area. If you also take into account that we allow third-party developers to add their definition into the system, it just makes it a very hard problem. So yes, I agree that that's probably the biggest challenge at this
But
point.
your Alexa backend did a really good job.
Thank you.
And I was very surprised that you didn't even talk about today. You talked about front end first, right? The back
Yeah,
end.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
actually looking forward, to listen to that one. I didn't get
All
information.
right, we'll talk after.
Okay,
We have run out of time. So thank you, gentlemen, for this
Thank you, Ron.
very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So it's now a lunch break. Lunch starts at 12:30 and at 1:30. Come back at 1:30. We will have more interesting sessions. Thank you.